even in normal times, it was common when working with clients who've experienced trauma that you yourself would bear an emotional impact from hearing client stories and witnessing their pain. And now in the midst of the pandemic, that we're slowly inching out of, that conversation is even more important. So we are so happy to have Virginia Torres here, who's an attorney. She has a master's in social work. She previously worked in legal aid at Lifespan, working with domestic violence victims. And she's going to talk to us about some practical tips that we can utilize this summer centered around vicarious trauma. So Virginia, thank you for being here. I'll pass it off to you. And I'm realizing that I called you Virginia Torres, but go ahead.
It's okay. That is my name.
Virginia Torres Ryan.
Virginia Torres Ryan. Okay, so I'm just going to, okay, everybody see that? Okay. We're good. Okay. So good morning, everyone. Like Brent said, my name is Virginia Torres Ryan. I appreciate the shout out to social workers I overheard when I got in early, because I am a social worker and a lawyer, and it's probably what's helped keep me sane. So I'm a therapist, I'm a lawyer, I'm a mother of 2 wonderful humans, and I am now the owner of Family Horizons and Family Horizons Legal, which is 2 separate organizations that provide forensic mental health and legal services to high conflict families in the domestic relations legal system. We also do individual and couple psychotherapy services for self-referred clients. But as Brett said, in my not so distant previous life, I was a public interest attorney for about 7 years. So there is a very special place in my heart for all of you. And I'm so honored to be able to connect with you today about a topic, vicarious trauma, that's very important to me. And I think it's very relevant to the work that we do and that you guys are going to do. And you'll see here that my contact information is on here, my email, my number. Last year, a lot of students reached out to me and we did virtual coffee dates. And I extend that offer to you guys because as new attorneys, build up your network and let me be a resource for you any way that I can. So first off, my biggest goal for this presentation is to help actually give you guys some tools to help you overcome vicarious trauma, because also, like the previous presenter said, it's coming for you. So this is going to be a very interactive presentation, and so I'm hoping to have a little bit of a more conversational approach. So last year I encouraged everyone to utilize the chat feature, so I'm still going to do that, but this time too I'm going to maybe do a little bit of aristocrat or whatever that method was. Law school was such a long time ago of just picking on people. So I am going to start with Ray Alvarez, because you're just right there. And you know, hopefully we're at the end of the pandemic, but obviously seeing as how we're all still meeting virtually, we're still impacted. So Ray, what is, and everyone else feel free to like throw a response in the chat, but just one word that kind of describes how you feel right now.
I feel relieved.
Okay. Sean McCormick, what do you feel?
I feel anxious.
Okay, 2 very different feelings. What about Danielle Crane? Cran? I apologize if I'm not pronouncing right.
It's Cron, but
Cron.
I feel busy.
Busy, okay. We'll do one more. Ashley, Michelle.
I'm feeling a little overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed, okay. So it sounds like we all need to channel our Ray Alvarez, who is positive, right? And figure out what he's doing to help keep us with some more positive emotions. So, and again, also, like, I want this to be interactive for everyone, so feel free if you want to throw a word in the chat to do that too. But my next question is going to be one thing that you missed the most that you could have been doing previous to the pandemic. So I'm going to keep going down the line. Oh, again, I apologize if I'm not pronouncing right. Eliza or Lisa McTurnan?
Eliza, you had it right the first time.
Okay.
I miss being able to travel and visit family and friends.
Yeah, that's hard. What about McKenna?
I miss being able to study in coffee shops and in public places.
Yeah. Catherine Carno, and then it cuts off.
Carnash. I miss hugging my friends.
Ah, yeah. Okay, and then one more. Sophia Vagnon, and then it comes up.
I miss being able to go indoor rock climbing.
Oh, okay. All right. And then the next question is one thing that you most, so kind of similar, I guess, but that you most look forward to when the pandemic is over, because I said this last year, one day it will be over, but this year it does seem like we're a little bit closer for it to be over. So let's keep going down the line. Jill O'Brien.
I'm looking forward to going to a movie.
Okay. Madeline Towns. Cuts off.
I look forward to playing Dungeons and Dragons in person with people.
Ian McCollum, I see you're outside. Are you inside? Is that
yeah, I'm outside. I'm on my porch. I look forward to live performances again.
Anika Nielsen.
Annika.
Annika.
Sorry. I'm looking forward to like potluck dinners.
Okay. And then last one, this is a hard last name for me. Sarah Conowitz.
Yeah, Conowitz. I'm looking forward to being able to just kind of go out for dinner on a whim, not have to have reservations or anything.
Okay, that's great. Now, did I lose my PowerPoint when I did that? Sorry, let me go back up. Okay. So what we just did, how do I change? Sorry, I'm still trying to learn how to navigate this. Well, now I stopped it. Brent, don't kill me. How do I?
No, you're good. We were seeing it though.
Okay. Now how do I? Okay, it's just gonna look like this. Sorry. Okay. Okay, so that was a grounding exercise. So that is something that can help you. It's a useful tool to do when you are starting to feel overwhelmed. So first you identify the problem, then you describe the negative impact that you're feeling. So that's kind of what we did when we said the things that we missed. And then you reframe and you look forward with an example of something that's going to provide you hope. So it seems like something small to do, but it kind of goes along with mindfulness practice. And if you do it enough, it can really help you get out of some of these maybe dark moments you might fall into when you are surrounded a lot with some of the trauma that your clients are working with. So I know you got a little bit of this in the previous presentation, but let's just kind of figure out what is trauma. So again, feel free to use the chat, but now my problem is I can't figure out how to see the chat and screen share at the same time. Let's see. Okay, here we go, I see it. Okay, so what is trauma? Feel free to type it in what you think, or I will keep kind of, and I don't expect expert responses or anything, but let's see. Let's go with McKay Mitchell. What do you think trauma is?
I think trauma is probably unprocessed pain and emotional suffering.
Yeah, absolutely right. Dane Christensen.
Yes. I would say that it's the lingering effects, or if it's negative, then the scars from some sort of significant event. And I would also say that it affects your brain. It's a programming that lingers with you afterward.
That's great. I know your camera's off, so I appreciate that you were ready to roll. One last one, and there's some really great responses in the chat as well. Jane Wasserman, what do you think trauma is? Jane? Okay, we'll move on. Emily Rodriguez? All right. Well, let's read. Oh, you're there. Okay. What do you think, trauma?
Yeah, I think trauma is also lasting feelings, emotions, impact that you can't necessarily get over and maybe constantly relive, triggered by an adverse event of some sort.
Yeah, right on. You guys got it. And the responses in the chat are also very on point. So we're going to go to the next one. So this is just very simply put, but trauma, a situation in which the stress caused by an event or series of events overwhelms one's ability to use the tools that they normally have at their disposal. And so that's just another way, again, of trying to have us get a practical kind of skill set in our Vicarious trauma tool belt, is to educate ourselves more on what trauma is, so that the more education we have, the more it's going to be easy for us to identify when a client is experiencing it and help us kind of separate that this is their trauma and what our role is and when we're working with them. And so let's go to the next slide. So kind of another kind of question, but I feel like you guys already answered this one pretty well, so I won't spend too much time on this one. But what do you think distinguishes a traumatic experience from a stressful one? And so I'll just ask a couple people. What about Kaylee Bean?
Hi. I think a traumatic experience is, not to use the word, but more stressful than a stressful one. So there's more of a response after a traumatic one.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about, so Sean wrote the lasting impact. I would agree with that. How about one more person? How about Amanda Lack?
Yeah, I would also say impact. I think that also maybe like this a stressful event could be something that happens, over the course of the day that kind of causes you anxiety or something like that. Whereas trauma could be a larger scale event, like something more catastrophic, perhaps like a car crash or a family member dying or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Madeline, thanks for a great response in the chat. You guys are experts. You could teach this yourself. So we'll keep going on. So kind of some of the things on here, but it's very similar. I feel like exactly what you guys said when you're looking at trauma versus stress is that trauma does fragment and disorganize your thoughts, your feelings, and your bodily experiences. And the other one I put on here is, it can make it difficult to learn from and make meaning out of experiences. So this kind of directly impacts, maybe you are meeting with a client, you're trying to put together a pleading, you're trying to prep them for what they're going to say, or you're trying to get background information on what happened to bring them to whatever situation you're helping them with. And it may be very impossible for them to kind of give you a clear timeline. And so having the understanding that this person is going through a traumatic experience, and that's what's, or has gone through a traumatic experience, and that's what's prohibiting them from being able to give you that timeline you need, will kind of allow you to go in with more realistic expectations from the client of like these, and having more realistic goals out of what you're going to get from that session. So let's keep moving on. So I want to know, so we can kind of make sure we make this as most relevant as possible, is what issues will clients be coming to you for help with? So there's a lot of people here. If you guys can all just maybe throw in the chat where everyone's going to be completing their fellowships at, just so that we can kind of get an idea of where everyone's at. Unless you've done this already and now it's just me getting an idea of where everybody's at. But so we've got legal counsel, Cabrini Green, Legal Aid Chicago, we're all CVLS, Land of Lincoln, Illinois Legal Aid Online, Shriver Center, Center for Disability and Elder Law, Mexican American Legal Defense, another Center for Disability, Prairie State. We're all over the board. I like that. So we got a lot of diversity in this group, which is really great of where everyone's going to be, ACLU. And I guess you can, trying to think, obviously a lot of you can't raise your hand, but you could just put yes or no, but let me know if you're going to be working with clients directly at your field work placements. There we go. Yes, 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 no, yes, 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 yes. Maybe, no, okay. Looks like 60-40, maybe 70-30 of people that are going to be working with clients directly. Okay. Sometimes. Do you know, you can put in there, like, is this going to be virtual interactions, in-person interactions, both? Both, virtual, yes, virtual mix. Mostly virtual, maybe some in-person, both, virtual, both. My, how the responses have changed so quickly. It was all virtual last year, it felt like. Okay, so this is a great sign. So both, so looks like a mix of some in-person stuff and then, but still probably primarily virtual. And then what about, can you let me know if you're going to be working with or alongside attorneys or other interns who work directly with clients? Yes, yes, yes. I guess the expectation is that everybody would. Yep. Yep. Okay. Another question. What populations do you expect to be working with? People with disabilities, immigrants, gender-based violence survivors, children, people with disabilities, incarcerated individuals, low income, the poor, seniors, full range, veterans, homeless. Okay. And I appreciate everyone being a director. Survivors of sexual violence, domestic violence. Okay. If I forget to say this, just one thing to keep in mind when working with survivors of sexual violence or survivors of domestic violence virtually is to maybe be a little bit, actually with all your clients virtually, being mindful of your backgrounds. So if you are having a Zoom meeting, please try to avoid having a bed in the background because that could trigger a client who's experienced sexual assault or maybe domestic violence. So if possible, try to keep it as neutral behind you as possible, just so that you're not gonna have any unexpected re-triggering impacts that maybe you weren't prepared for or that you could easily have avoided. Next question I'm gonna ask is, what issues do you expect to be encountered with when you're working with these populations? Which is the question on the slide. Divorce, custody, parentage, housing discrimination, bankruptcy, accessing benefits, orders of protection, housing discrimination, criminal records, immigration status, tax, housing. Those great issues related to poverty and social. This thing goes so fast sometimes, I can't read fast enough. Employment discrimination. Okay, so we've got a lot of issues here and different things that we're going to be kind of working with clients with. So again, great variety. Eviction, consumer debt, elder abuse, divorce, and wills. Okay, so let's go to the next slide, which is, what does trauma feel like for clients? So, you know, going to my theme of ways to overcome vicarious trauma, if you set yourself up with the goal that you're going to be able to empathize with your client and put yourselves in their shoes, then being able to build a rapport and trust so you can get the most useful information out of them is going to help you get a more productive meeting And that's going to help you stay grounded and help you separate yourself from your client's trauma. You don't want to stay in the trauma with your client, or else you're going to get burnt out. So just kind of like looking at some of these things, just to be mindful that if you are in a meeting with a client and maybe they're saying some of these symptoms that they're having, you may not have necessarily associated them with the trauma if you didn't know otherwise, right? So if someone is sitting in a meeting with you telling you that they have a headache or they're feeling really fatigued, you might just think maybe they didn't get enough sleep, or maybe they didn't get their coffee, something like that. But being mindful that a lot of times trauma does associate with physical symptoms. So just the more education we can have, the better of being able to prepare for it. So let's see, what else do we got going on here? Here's another slide about physical symptoms. Here are some more physical symptoms, just to kind of keep in the back of your mind that your clients could be coming in with. It's like disruption in eating or sleeping patterns. So maybe you're meeting with a client and they seem to be really tired and like not able to focus. And you might think, oh, well, like maybe something happened and they couldn't get enough sleep. Maybe the thought of having to come meet you today and having to tell their story led to their disruption in being able to sleep. So all of these things to just make sure that we're remembering and going into these meetings knowing that they are very likely to occur is going to help us to be able to separate that vicarious trauma from the trauma that our clients have been going through. So let's keep going. What does trauma look like? So I talked about some of the physical symptoms that you might see, and then these might be some of the behavioral emotional symptoms that you might see. So some hypervigilance, some self-blame, anger, rage, desire for revenge. You know, for individuals that are going to be doing family law, like you see this a lot with a lot of anger and a lot of like, I'm in it to like win my case, and you know, this is going to be very black and white. This person should have no parenting time or no decision making or something. And trying to be mindful that maybe their expectations of the legal system are a result of them not having the proper resources to channel their trauma with what had happened with their ex-partner. And so you may be having to have a lot of conversations with the client about the realities of the legal system. So whether that be with family law or whatever other types of settings that you're working with clients, to help them kind of understand that this anger is not going to get solved through your legal work. And obviously, like if you get like the other presenters said, like getting more training on trauma-informed interviewing, but also being able to just hand the resource to the client of, here are some organizations that do counseling or therapy or safety planning that can help you work through these issues while I focus on your legal issues, because it's not going to be your responsibility as a public interest attorney to solve all of their problems, right? You have to kind of make sure that you're setting boundaries for what your goal and your purpose is going to be in this client's in life and this client's meeting and your interactions with them. So let's keep moving. This is more kind of the behavioral symptoms that you might see from trauma. So grief, dissociating from friends, loss of trust. As you know, when you're trying to build that attorney-client relationship, like most relationships, it's going to require trust, but it might be very, very difficult for your client to establish trust with you, or might be able to be difficult for you to establish trust with your client if you feel like your client is not being honest with you. And that, again, like the best thing you can do is try to understand why your client is not being truthful with you and helping them process that, and do your best to build a rapport with them, instead of maybe taking the approach of, well, they're lying to me, I can't represent them, like this isn't going to work, because we want to try to avoid having a client be re-traumatized, right? So we just want to do our best to try to meet the client where they're at and be understanding of some of these behavioral symptoms that we're going to see that might make it more challenging for us as the attorney to physically do our job. I don't, if I'm going too fast or anything, or if you have any questions about anything, like feel free to either ask me privately or publicly in the chat, and I can kind of slow down. So expressed trauma. So we're going to talk about expressed trauma, and then we're going to talk about controlled trauma and kind of how what that looks like, so that when you are in meetings or interactions with clients, you'll be a little bit more mindful of it and be able to, again, make sure that you're like separating yourself from it to avoid you kind of being sucked into that trauma vicariously. So you might see some of these things in these meetings, or if you're not working with clients directly, but maybe you're working with another attorney or another staff member who is, they might be seeing these things directly and then maybe coming to you to vent about it, or just to relay it to you. And so it helps you get a better kind of sense of what that practitioner is experiencing with their client meetings as well. So I think I've seen all these things in public interest work, where there's clients crying in meetings, swearing, shouting, laughing, you know, and it can be really challenging as a public interest attorney, because you might have a you most likely will have a very high caseload, and you may only have a certain amount of time that you can meet with this client. And if the client is crying or not really answering the questions that you need them to, it might become a little bit frustrating that it's not going the way that maybe you planned, which might have to result in you having another meeting with them that you really don't have the time to do that with. So just kind of knowing when you go into the meeting, one tip for that might be, especially your first meeting with a client, can be, you know, I've allocated this amount of time for our meeting today, and this is kind of my loose agenda of what I would like to accomplish. And so during this meeting, there may be some difficult topics that we talk about, and I want this to be a safe space for you to be able to, you know, respond however you need to. But in the event I might bring you back to a different question, I don't want you to feel like I'm being insensitive. I'm just trying to do my best on my end to make sure that we can try to accomplish as much as we need to today for this goal, and whether that goal be like doing this pleading or preparing for tomorrow's hearing or filling out this affidavit for your immigration case. Like, if we can try to upfront tell the client in the beginning of the meeting what the plan is, then it'll be easier to maybe redirect them throughout the meeting if they start to show some signs of expressed trauma, as opposed to if they just come into the office and you're meeting with them and then it's like, I know you're really upset right now, but it's really important for us to talk about this. At least having it at the forefront makes it a little bit smoother for everybody. So that is the expressed trauma. And then the other kind of way you might see it is the controlled trauma. And this one is a little bit more, for lack of a better word, dormant, a little bit harder to identify. So these might be some of the actual behaviors you see in your client meeting, where this client might have a little bit more of a controlled way of doing their trauma, but there can still be obstacles in you meeting your goals, because they might, for example, like that third one, they may avoid talking about it. So, you know, if you're trying to prepare an affidavit for an order of protection and you need to go over history of abuse and they have no interest in talking about it, that's going to make it very challenging for you to get that pleading. So just kind of being mindful and saying, I know this is going to be really difficult about it. Let's try to work through this now so that we can avoid having to meet again and work through it. And hopefully you can, you know, get your goals accomplished with the client. But at the end of the day, the goal for you as the public interest attorney is to know that this had nothing to do with me, right? So if after this 2-hour meeting, I feel like I wasn't able to get the information I needed to finish my pleading, at least I know that this wasn't because I couldn't do my job or I'm a bad lawyer or I didn't ask the right questions, right? you are only capable of so much. And so making sure that you're not putting that on yourself is going to be really important to help make sure that you don't take on that vicarious trauma and feel burnt out. So let's keep moving. Okay, so I have kind of talked a little bit about vicarious trauma, but let's see what the experts, you guys, kind of already know about it. So again, feel free to put in the chat what you think. Oh shoot, didn't even do that. Hold on, go back. Okay, what you guys think vicarious trauma is. Maybe I'll ask a couple people. So let's see, now I can't remember who I asked. What about Daniel Henry?
All right. I know how to explain that exactly, but it's basically dealing with clients who have trauma. You kind of internalize some of the issues and you start dealing with them yourself.
That's perfect. Yes. What about Megan Grenville?
Yeah, I think it's when you're exposed to somebody else's trauma, you kind of take some of that on and have to deal with it as well in your own way.
You guys got this. We'll do one more. What about Paris Mayfield? Paris? We don't have Paris with us. What about Elaine Cleary? Elaine? Nope. Okay. What about Jasmine Sidhu? I apologize if I'm not saying your name right.
Sorry, you said it correctly. I would say I would echo what people before me have said, but I would kind of relate it to when you were saying like you vicariously live through someone. It's you're kind of coming from a place like you feel guilty, so you kind of feel like I have to feel these emotions as well and kind of empathize with them. But because it's vicarious, that you can't control how much you go into those emotions, and you'll carry it with you as long as you're continuing that relationship with that client.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And there is, there's a lot of really good responses in the chat as well. So thank you guys for that. So I'll just put in, but it's basically what everyone said. A cumulative effect of working with trauma, which can affect many aspects of a person's life long after the work has finished. Some other names for it can be secondary trauma, compassion fatigue, which I saw in the chat, work-related trauma exposure. And so I think the key words on here is long after the work has finished, right? So as public interest attorneys, as attorneys in general, you don't really get that. Maybe you can try. You don't really have that like 9 to 5 clock in, clock out position unless you're very, very, very strict about it. But the goal here is at least mentally, once you are leaving the office, whether that be virtually, which makes it a little bit harder, or physically, that you are mentally as well leaving the office and making sure that you have appropriate boundaries to do that. Because if you are taking that case with you home and thinking about it at night, that is going to just, that vicarious trauma is going to grow and grow inside of you. And that is going to really just burn you out. And we don't want that because that's not going to be helpful for anybody. And so let's see. So here is another slide of what vicarious trauma can look like on the professional. So while those are beautiful candles in the background, those are not beautiful words that you see in front of you, right? Anxiety, self-doubt, also known as imposter syndrome, which you probably will feel as a new lawyer. Like, I am responsible for helping this person do their legal case, and I have no idea what am I doing. Like, I should not be a lawyer. Those are very natural, normal, the appropriate feelings to have. Just make sure that you are processing those appropriately, either with your supervisors, through therapy, through mentors that you have. Like I said before, I'm happy to be here for anybody who's going through any of these feelings that they may have, because you are likely to feel them. And even when we started this presentation off in the beginning, I did kind of hear some of these words already. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to say about these. Probably I do want to be mindful of that last one, substance addiction, because it is really important, and attorneys in general are very high risk for having substance addiction issues. So be mindful of that throughout your careers. When you are engaging in any kind of substance use, think about why you're doing it. Am I going out for lunch with friends and having a margarita and enjoy the day? Or am I just so stressed out and I can't not think about work that I need to have 1, 2, 3, 4 glasses of wine each night to fall asleep so that I don't think about these cases? So please be mindful of how much substance intake that you have, because again, that's something that's very high risk for attorneys, and we just want to be our best selves. We spend a lot of time, we spend a lot of money to be attorneys, and we just want to be as successful at it as possible. And I'm sorry if I sound like I'm preaching, I don't mean to do that. Vicarious trauma and self-care, and I feel like the previous presenters were talking about self-care a little bit, so this kind of just piggybacks off that, but these are all some examples of ways that you can think about self-care to be on top of vicarious trauma. So, you know, knowing when you're pushing your limits. So a big thing is making sure you're very strict with your boundaries of when you're turning work off. And that can be really hard to do sometimes as an attorney. I know when I was at Lifespan, I always had my email on my phone because it was likely that a client was going to have an emergency, and I wanted to know as soon as possible when I'm going to need to have to deal with it. If you can keep your emails off of your phone, if you can not look at them, that's great. For me personally, when I was in that role, it gave me more anxiety not to check my email because I was just so convinced there was something on there that checking it made it easier for me to realize, okay, it's not, it's fine, I can move on. So you know how you work best, and figuring out that, what it's that self-care and knowing what works for you and the boundaries that you need to set in order to be able to separate yourself from work. I'm going to see if there's anything else I want to say about that slide. Let's see, that's 18. Okay. Healthy boundaries with coworkers. Very, very important. I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier when I asked about who's going to be working with attorneys. So I know right now you're kind of at an intern staff relationship. You know, you're all going to do a wonderful job, maybe get hired on by the agencies that you're interning at, and then you become colleagues, and just making sure that you can have healthy boundaries with your coworkers. Leaving work at work, talking about work with others can be a little bit tricky because sometimes when you are with outside friends who maybe don't do public interest work, the type of work that you do can come off as very just depressing and difficult to talk about. And a lot of times, you know, people might be celebrating at a party and they don't want to hear about individual children who have been sexually abused, or you know, low-income people who can't get housing, or senior citizens who are being abused. And so that's fine. If possible, everyone loves to hear success stories. So when you are talking about your work with others, maybe sharing some of the success stories that you've had can just help you feel better about the type of the work that you're doing too. That staying positive piece is huge. And when you're hanging out with your coworkers, making sure, if possible, if we're not in the office and maybe we're hanging out at a friend's party or something like that, let's try to not just always talk about work, so that we can take a mental break from it and we can talk about all the wonderful things that are going on in our lives and have a good balance. One other thing I will say about coworkers is probably everyone deals with vicarious trauma differently. And so some coworkers might deal with it better than others. And if you feel like you have a coworker who is not dealing with it in a healthy way, just kind of trying to not compare yourself to that person, try to do what you can to keep yourself positive. If you're in an agency where you're having great supervision, talk about it then, ways that as a team, everyone can kind of work together better for the benefit of the clients, because that's the ultimate goal, right? And then it's 11:17, so I do want to add some time for questions, but that's all I had for substance stuff. I was going to end with just another kind of tool for you, another way to unwind. So this is an exercise that I actually do in therapy sessions with clients that struggle with high anxiety or excessive worrying, to help them kind of just train their minds to get out of overdrive mode and help them be able to focus on a different topic. So I'm going to go back to picking on people, and feel free to interact in the chat as well. But we're just going to talk about some stuff that has nothing to do with trauma. So let's see who with Seth Sanders. Would you rather be invisible or be able to fly?
I'll go with fly.
Why?
You got great views that way for free.
Okay, that one works. We'll do someone else. What about Aletha Williams?
Yes, Alethea. And I think I'd rather be invisible, because I think it's some rooms I would like to be in without anybody knowing.
That's a good point. I agree with you there. We'll do one more for this one. What about Natalie Barnaby?
Hi, I would definitely pick invisibility, because I would just sometimes like to blend in and not be in certain places, but be there, like the last person said.
Yeah, perfect. So let's move on to the next one. Someone in the chat said, if you can fly, you can't fall to your death. That's fair. Being invisible makes it hard to order coffee. That's true too. Next one. So this one is going to be for Sophia Wilson. Lose your ability to speak or have to say everything you are thinking?
I would probably say lose my ability to speak. Those are hard to choose in between, though.
Yeah. Why would you pick that one?
I think that there are lots of things that should not be said, so I wouldn't want to have to say everything that I think about, and I'll just get better at sign language, so problem solved.
What about Hayden Gunter? Hayden?
Sorry, yeah, I would have to agree and say lose my ability to speak, because I don't think the other option would turn out very well for me or for other people.
Okay. And we'll do one more. What about Annie Wilt?
I also agree, definitely lose ability to speak for all of the same reasons everyone else has already touched on.
All right, let's go to the next one. We got a couple more. Nicole Massey. Have to listen to music all the time or not be able to listen to music at all?
Okay, I have to say I would choose not to listen to music at all.
Why?
Because I think there are times where you just need the silence around you. And as much as I like music, but having to listen to music all the time would just ignore the fact that I also like to be by myself and alone and need time to think.
Yeah. Let's see. Bella Midgley. I don't know if I'm saying the last name right.
I actually agree. I would pick no music at all. I'm not a huge music person anyway, and I agree. I like the silence. I think it would give me a headache to have music on all the time.
Interesting. The individuals that are talking are different from the responses in the chat, but I do see that somebody is talking about Black Mirror on the chat, and I love that show, so let's be friends. Amila Golick? What would you
Yeah,
say?
I think I would listen to music all the time, but if there's an ability to just turn it down, that I think solves the problem.
Okay, you guys, see? Creative thinkers, you're gonna be just fine dealing with creative ways to, oh, geez, what did I just do? Deal with vicarious trauma. Okay, so I think I got 2 more maybe. Okay. So this one is for Logan Kwan. Would you change one part of your past or see one part into your future?
Oh, wow. That's tough. Probably one part into my future, I think.
Why?
I mean, it'd be kind of nice to see like just one picture of the stock market in 20 years. And then I could know how to invest any money that I might have, so I could get up to that. So.
That's a great answer. What about Amber Freeney? What would you say?
I would see one part of into my future because I do believe everything happens for a reason, and all the past experience make you who you are, whether they were great experiences, whether they were not. And I guess I would just see into the future also because I do sometimes, wonder about my future and worry about it sometimes. It would be nice to see just a glimpse, but I wouldn't change anything about my past.
I love it. I love all this. Okay. I'm going to ask one more person. That's one. David Fike?
I knew you were going to ask me. I don't want to know my future, but I also agree with the person who just spoke, and I, as much as sure I might have regrets and things I worry about in my past, I have accepted them and I don't necessarily want to change them. But I guess I can't reject the premise of your question. So I'll change something small in my past. I'll like wear a different shirt yesterday.
There you go. And I just, bringing it back to the clients with trauma, right? They can't really change their past either. But I love how everyone here has so much optimism about a part into the future. And so maybe this can be a tool when you are dealing with a client who just can't get out of their past, working with them to find the light in their future can really go a long way for both them and for you. So we're going to do the last one. This question goes to James Gao, G-A-O. Would you rather have it be summer forever or winter forever?
Okay, you're gonna hate me for this, but winter, because I can't stand mosquitoes and you can always put on another sweater. You can't take off all your clothes when it gets hot.
I love it. I would never hate you. It's a great answer. Lisa Sharp. Lisa? Lisa's not with us. How about Megan Anderson?
I would definitely want it to be summer forever. I love the hot weather and all the fun stuff you can do in Chicago in the summer.
There's a lot of fun stuff that we will now soon be able to do once these restrictions keep lifting. And one last one, Dina Castro.
Yeah, I would also have to go with summer forever. I think winter just has maybe too much of a
a negative impact on my emotional state. So I much prefer the warm weather.
Yeah, that's great. That's all I had. Like I said, please feel free to reach out with me if there's anything I can do. I'm not a public interest attorney anymore, which is wild for me to even say because it was a very recent change, but it's wonderful work. And it's very important and it's very struggling, and you guys are going to do wonderfully in it. And just reach out if you need me. If anyone has any questions or anything, I know that I got like 3 minutes left, or I'll leave it to Brent. You want to just end whatever.
Well, I'm happy to end it early, 3 minutes early if folks want, but also, you know, if people have questions, feel free to unmute yourself or add something into the chat. For Virginia, maybe I'll vamp for 1 minute in case people have any questions. Just looks like lots of thank yous.
You're welcome. Thank you guys so much for giving me this space, and Brent for inviting me back.